Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in on this ocean session. I'm Marijn Rabaut. I'm working for the Blue Cluster, and I'm happy to moderate this session this morning. Please stay with us still around 11 o'clock. What if we need multi-use large infrastructures to tackle large challenges globally? What if we need to develop, this infrastructures to develop sustainable technologies and innovations? And what if we need these multi-use large infrastructures at sea? Well, then we are convinced we need to co-create. We need to build this together from the very beginning. Co-creation means that we go beyond technical and financial aspects, but that we also include the spatial impact of these infrastructures and also the social implications. It is not to be confused with an a posteriori stakeholder consultation process. It is building together these large infrastructures to come to sustainable solutions. And in these sessions, we want to dive deeply into the knowledge we have at hand today to actually create these co-creation processes. And moreover, we focus on maritime and marine challenges. Is it possible to create large-scale multi-use solutions in the marine environment? Can we go for these co-creations at sea? And how does it work from a policy point of view? And what science do we have at hand? Before we start the session, we open the session, I want to urge you that you can ask your questions. Please write them down, go to the chat box in the Hopin platform and put all your questions there. We will have some time with the panelists to answer these questions. So now let's get started. I'm very honored that we have a very high level and diverse group from policy, marine science, urbanists together actually to talk about co-creation processes at sea. And to open the session, I have the honor to present our European Commissioner for Environment, Ocean and Fisheries, Mr. Virginijus Sinkevičius.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, thank you for the opportunity to open your session on co-creating blue innovation. As Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, and as former Minister of Economy and Innovation in my home country, this topic is very close to my heart. All the more because blue innovation is one of the keys for achieving the ambitions of the European Green Deal. As you all know, the Green Deal is our long-term strategy to create sustainable growth in Europe. It is based on key sustainability pillars such as decarbonization, circular economy, biodiversity restoration, and minimizing waste and pollution. The blue economy will play a pivotal role in all of these areas. If we want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, we will need much more electricity, at least twice what we have today. And more than a quarter of that electricity will be generated offshore. That is the same as what we generate from fossil fuel today. In 2050, we will also need more land for sustainable biofuel and biomass. But this comes at a time when we urgently need to preserve biodiversity and habitats as well, and save forests and wetlands as carbon sinks. Also, in order to increase resilience against unpredictable COVID-like shocks, we need to become more autonomous in food production. It's clear that we don't have enough land to meet all those needs. This is why everyone is looking at the sea for answer. And thankfully, the sea offers one extra dimension compared to land. But despite its size, the sea is not endless. And this is definitely true for the North Sea. So our main challenge will be to make sure that all the different interests do not become competing interests. This is a question of holistic design, of building an entirely new seascape rather than shoring up the existing model. And there are many options. What if we develop electrolysis plants on offshore islands, for example, to support the production of hydrogen, which we will need for the chemical industry and as a fuel for buses, trains, ships, and maybe even airplanes? What if we cultivate algae and shellfish in the space between wind farms? I know that Belgium has had some successes and there are plans in other countries too. These areas could become spawning grounds and nurseries for many other species, who in turn provide food for animals higher up the chain, including rays, seals, and also humans. There are so many ways to find synergies in a holistic vision. From the Commission, we can provide the tools to help you develop this vision. The EU is putting unprecedented resources into this blue and green transition. The new Recovery and Resilience Facility is not only helping societies recover from the COVID catastrophe, but it is helping us rebuild a better world. The focus is green and digital. We need both in the blue economy. To support R&D, oceans have been selected as one of the 5 missions for the new research program Horizon Europe. And with Blue Invest, we are providing support grants and guarantees to blue SMEs, bringing the innovations we need onto the market. I urge you to take full advantage of these instruments and help us turn the blue economy into the driver of a new industrial revolution. Only this time, the skyline will not be dominated by smoky chimneys, but by slowly turning blades. For this to work out successfully, we need everyone on board, from the fishermen and women who are today fearing loss of their fishing grounds to the energy producers, ports, shippers, and environmental NGOs. All parties have to benefit in the long run. Your ideas, plans, and innovations must help build a common vision of how the seas can save our future. This co-creation session is therefore an ideal opportunity for you to come together, even if it is virtually, to look at what tools are available and think how they can contribute to healthy and productive oceans. Because now is the time to define what we want from our seas. We have this unique opportunity to develop the maritime space with a horizon of several generations and create clean energy, healthy food, new industries, as well as ecosystems that reverse decades of degradation. Let's take this opportunity with both hands.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sinkevičius, for this enthusiastic talk on blue transition, on synergies, on co-creation. And then we can move to the keynote speech of today, which will be presented by Professor Alexander Doge. He is Director of the International Design Agency in Urbanism and Architecture, ORC, here in Brussels, and he is Associated Professor at the MIT, United States. He is specialized in co-creation processes on land, and recently he started also a project at sea. So please, Alexander, the floor is yours.
Good morning. How are you? It is my privilege and honor to speak at this reunion, and I'll present to you ongoing research, which is in fact near a conclusion. And this research has been done by a number of companies, including my own, but also a company of Deme, Jan de Nul, Econopolis, and IMDC. And we've had innovation support from the Flemish and the Brussels government for this, for which we're very thankful. Our researchers have also included Tractable and the Common Ground and the University of Antwerp. The question that we've looked at with the research is goes back to the impossibility of imagining large public works at sea, certainly in the Belgian context, if you don't take into account enormous public interest in this particular piece of territory or geography. So we've asked ourselves the question, is it possible to co-create together with all of society to build a new category of marine objects? We could call this category for now marine multifunctional landscape infrastructures, and I know that's a mouthful, but marine multifunctional landscape infrastructure signifies a broad open category of infrastructure investments in our North Sea. And can we do that in order to harvest, can we do it together, collectively, in order to harvest the potentials of our marine environment? clearly you are all aware that there are many functions and actions that are going on today in the North Sea, but the pressure for added functionality is only rising. You know, on the left here we see an impression of potential aquaculture. You know, agriculture truly, but in a marine environment. Mussels, for instance. On the right, you see an imagination of growth in ecotourism, ocean tourism, the consumption of some of the delicious elements of the ecosystem of the North Sea, but also an extremely important, given sea level rise and the unavoidable growth in energy absorbed in our oceans due to climate change, protection from flooding. Which is again on the left. And on the right, of course, shipping is not diminishing. Shipping is only becoming more important as our world becomes more integrated. Shipping, but also the energy needed to keep our supply chains going. So there's pressure for more and more functions. Yet, you know, what we're used to working on here today, you know, in our conventional mindset is to build single-purpose infrastructures. That's the way we're all wired. That's the last 100 years of infrastructure thinking and engineering, singular solutions for singular problems. You see examples of them here, and we think that's no longer truly adequate in the age we're currently facing. A great pilot area for this is Belgium and Flanders for a particular reason. If you look on the left, you see that, you know, you'll see that Flanders is the most densely populated region of Europe. More dense than the Netherlands, in fact, more dense than Israel. It's almost 500 people per square kilometer. It's basically a city. But you know, the funny thing is the city has, and Belgium as a whole, has also claims on its territorial waters, which you also see marked up. And on the right, you see the federal marine plan, the marine spatial plan that is currently in place. And you see how much functions and functionalities and programs are already at work. This is not a pristine blue piece of North Sea or blue-gray. This is an intensely active, fully functional system of uses, which needs like a spatial plan. You know, the red striped zones that you see here are for instance, the zones for windmills. The blue zones are, of course, the shipping channels. As you can see, everything that is not shipping channel has basically been claimed for use. We should not forget that the Belgian North Sea, as a particular case study, has a long history of cultural appropriation. I mean, it has been painted, it has been depicted by famous artists in European history for hundreds of years. And it has an iconic function. It has an iconic function in the history of Europe, certainly in the history of Belgium. In that sense, you could say it's a bit like the Mont Blanc, which also is an icon of European geography, except that our North Sea is also super functional, intensively used, and is getting structures built on it the way we would never accept from the Mont Blanc. So it's an intensely cultural geography as well, shared and public and accessible to all. So if we're thinking about big collective investments in the future of our North Sea to yield multifunctional benefits, we got to think about how we will do better than in the past. You know, 1 in 3 big infrastructures on land and on sea together get realized. 1 in 3. And that's because we're, you know, it's complicated, but we're generally able to manage in some kind of way the technical and financial risks associated with big infra. But where things go awry, where they go wrong, is that we are often failing to correctly assess the social risks, the risks of, some people call that public acceptance, but you could also call it the public interest and the various stakeholders that constitute it, and how to understand those forces and to work with them. But also the risks to surroundings, like what are the negative side effects of any particular infrastructure on the world around it. So 1 in 3 get built, 2 in 3 fail because we fail to assess the risks associated with stakeholders and social risks, let's say, and environmental risks, surroundings risks. That's exactly where we position our research. We try to build a methodology to address this. And that's the essence of our proposal. So we've built, or we are building, a method to help design and implement projects in the North Sea with a generic toolbox and a co-creation trajectory that is goes hand in hand with it. And we're testing it in our North Sea. So I'm not going to take you in a, let's say, a bureaucratic way through the research. I'm just going to highlight a number of things. But fundamentally, we start with the first question we begin with is, what does nature allow for? The North Sea is a very powerful, corrosive, eroding system, and wind and water sculpt things in a certain way, and there you can't really mess with that. So what does nature allow for? And the second, given what nature allows for, what can we place on there? What kind of functionalities, programs can we deploy on those nature-based forms? And especially in question 3, how can we combine them? How do we allow for multifunctionality? And if we have those 3 in a good shape, we can actually engage the public, because with those, you almost have a sort of a game board. You know the rules by which you can create shapes. You could know how you can place things on them. And so together you can engage in the conversation. Now, what should be the outcome of this process? Important is that we also want to look at how future generations will be able to make their own choices. So we do not want to make choices in this process that, prejudge what our children and our grandchildren will want to choose, which might be different than what we are ready for. And of course, the most important question: how do you do this together with large groups of people in a complicated, rich social environment? Where I would say the big thing is certainly in Belgium, but I would say in most of Western Europe, distributed power. Societies with distributed power. Nobody is able to push anything through top down anymore. So what does nature allow for? Pictures like this of the Wadden Islands in the Netherlands actually show what nature allows for. There are rules, and the rules have to do with erosion patterns, deposit patterns, with the way sand drifts and flows, what happens when a big storm occurs, and how those forces end up sculpting a landscape and giving it a very particular shape based on highly specific logics. These logics we should understand and only work with them. And you see here, for instance, if you look image to the right, you can plot out, of course, quite precisely what the slope is that you can allow for a sandy environment without it being washed away at the first storm. A very slight slope. If you go with harder structures, which you see on the top, you can go much steeper, but they will actually over time also suffer. So you want to work with nature. In that sense, you then see that various island shapes are possible, but many more aren't. And so to get a sense of, through various simulations and research on ongoing study with good hydrological models, you can get a sense of the forms, the morphologies that would be allowed if you want to think about underwater sandbanks or, of course, island formations above a high tide line. And any of these forms will have their own erosion and deposit patterns as a result, and you can sort of form is in a sense not static. It will evolve over time. It will shift shapes. Knowing that we have a dynamic landscape which can be created and then will live its own life, we can actually now think of what are the functions, the programs. You call it the kit of parts. You could potentially imagine on these. And I want to go back for this slide for a second. You will see we have a whole set of chapters here, fact sheets you could call them. The first ones have to do, and a big set has to do with energy. We do think that the only way we can truly justify a big collective investment that comes above water, that takes the shape of an island, is one that has so obviously, clearly necessary to our collective benefit, that we can justify it collectively. And I think that one of the elements here has to do with batteries, or let's say storage for renewable energy. If we see the amount of power, renewable energy the North Sea can generate, and is already generating with the hundreds and hundreds of windmills that have been built, we need to be able to store this energy. So that's one, and a huge one, storage for renewable energy, so we can let go of other more conventional polluting or fossil fuel-based energy provisions. You see on the left here very clearly, we are peaking with the red diagram. We are peaking with energy at a certain moment with renewables, but we need to be able to store it so we can also use it when there is no provision of renewable, but we have a demand for it. One option is the hydropower dam, which you see on your right, which is the reverse of a dam. So when there is ample energy, you actually empty a lake in the middle of the ocean, you pump it out, and when you need the energy, you let it fill. So the ocean is basically dammed around a hole in the ocean. This is one figure that could be actually quite effective, but it requires an enormous capital investment upfront to just pay off this particular structure. So it is extremely efficient from it's an extremely efficient structure actually, but it takes a lot of. You choose this. There is no graduality. There is no incremental growth. You do it or you don't. Another option, which is more incremental, is hydropower, which is less efficient, but allows more incremental growth. That hydropower is, hydrogen power. So hydrogen storage in particular. You could have high pressure tanks that could be stored, and definitely this is a system that can grow with time. You can have smaller amounts of storage in 2025 already. 30 you can grow, and you can actually grow with demand or grow with in line with the global energy transition. A good reason to think of hydrogen storage offshore in our ocean is that clearly we have nobody living on the ocean, but when you think of large collections of storage, like big storage units, there is an associated explosion risk, which in small distributed facilities is less, but in a big collective facility, big facility, it's not to be dismissed. So here we have two examples of energy storage, and then there's many more, but we've in our research focused on these two because they seem very promising, but they are requiring, let's say, parallel choices in other fields of policy and governance. Of course, once you build with nature a structure that would house such a storage facility, you can do plenty of other things. And one thing, just as an example, is that we can have also relatively sustainable forms of aquaculture and aqua production. Here, the example is the mussels, production of mussels, which you can do both in, as you can see, you can do this both in underwater environments, which is the long lines, or the image to the right, in intertidal environments with Bouchot mussel production. Both of these have advantages, have different yields, and are both useful in this kind of environment, and definitely could be taken advantage of when you build a big energy storage facility. You could have additional uses that yield additional revenue and benefits to the project. Where you do this, the processing of these mussels has been a big source of debate, since we are actually not looking for any population on this kind of island. We are not looking for people to stay there permanently. We actually you don't want that. It is largely a reserve, a natural reserve, with some uses. So processing facilities will need to be on land, and I think we think that's okay given the distances. Of course, if you build with nature, you first of all, you may put energy in it, you may harvest mussels on it, but basically it's a landscape, it's an ecological system, it's an ecosystem with various kinds of services, and an important service, specifically in the Belgian context, is seal resting areas. You can see here in the left map where in Europe seals can be found. But the Belgian condition, which I showed you in the beginning, which is intensely used and intensely functionally assigned territory of our waters, leaves little place for improvisation and for ecosystem diversity. So we gotta make room for that. And so the notion of a sandbank, which could provide some ecotourism, is really attractive here. We can work with the seals, provide a resting place in the middle of this highly functional landscape that is the Belgian territorial waters. If you think of what we're putting together here, it's still relatively open-ended. I mean, it's a kit of parts. There are elements, there are shapes, there are morphologies, but there are still a lot of choices to be made. And how we put things together concretely is a question for co-creation. Is a question to solve together. with the stakeholders, with the public interest groups, and potentially also with companies. This is an operation that could be could have a public, but certainly could have a very strong also private component. Thinking of parcelization here will be very important. Parcels are as old as society. And parcels are basically divisions of land onto which you can put a lease, and somebody leases the land and puts a pre-approved or a pre-agreed set of uses on there and pays you some money for it. So it could really help also with the cost-benefit analysis of such a collective investment. Parcelization is a big deal because it could be completely unlike parcels on land, because the whole notion of accessibility is just structured on a different basis. So if you look at all these elements, I'd like to begin to bring these together in a sort of very general roadmap. Now, mind you, once this research is complete, the next step logically would be that once there is a mandate, you go to a large public engagement and you try to figure out together as a society where you want to end up, what priorities we want to have in this territory, in this marine zone. But what you see here is a genealogy of options and choices for the next 100 years. It starts, of course, in the current situation, and we can pretty soon, in certain zones, start to think about a more intensive use, but no real infrastructure investments yet. Like intensification of uses, but with minimal investment. Just testing, piloting a few technologies, limited footprint. And at some point, we'll arrive at bigger choices. And what you see in the zone in Roman numeral 2, is a series of options for island shapes. And these island shapes, some of them correspond to the more circular or closed ones, correspond to a choice for a hydropower station, and the more linear ones, or the smaller ones, correspond to a choice for hydrogen storage. Excuse me. These could grow with time. This is step 3. And then after a while, they will be decommissioned. And we have to assume, and we have to look up to that future. We want to basically provide a circular piece of infrastructure where the decommissioning can be partially predicted, or can be in fact completely predicted. The nice thing about North Sea morphology is that we know we understand to some degree how water erodes things, where water takes sand and where it deposits it, how the flows work. Of course, in 100 years, some things will have changed. Not all the banks will be in exactly the same place they are today. But still, we can predict. And with that, we can actually plan for how the deposits will gradually shift and how the islands will gradually, in fact, decompose and return to an unsupervised state. I want to show you now and delve into, with the last minutes of this presentation, I want to delve into some an illustration, some aspects of, let's say we take a certain set of choices. What would happen? And so this island is built on this marine multifunctional landscape infrastructure is built on the following set of choices. We're assuming that there will be a hydrogen storage facility. And we're assuming that we will have maximum multifunctionality. And we're also assuming that there will be a lot of public debate and that parts of the islands will change in function, or parts of the infrastructure will need to be able to change in function over time. So we want to really have the flexibility built into the entity. So if you look at this particular one, you see in the center area, you see this black perimeter, a bit kidney-shaped, with a red dot in the middle. That perimeter contains, it's a dune, it's a set of dunes in dry land. It's the middle of the structure. It's dry land. There is no flooding here. Underneath that dune is a hydrogen storage facility, and that footprint corresponds, with the best of today's knowledge, to 3% of the hydrogen storage needs of Flanders in 2050. With a set of assumptions, that's what we'll need. So That's a lot of storage, and we could start building that today. Now, what you see is that it's part of a longer structure. Just to orient you a bit on this plan drawing, the dark blue elements are mussel production. So you see on the north side, on the ocean side, away from land. Land is in this drawing south from the drawing, where the word MMLI3, Marine Multifunctional Landscape Infrastructure, option 3, where that word is, that's about where the Belgian coastline begins. The northern mussels are in an intertidal regime. Sorry, they're Bouchot mussels, so they flood and they are exposed to air and then they flood again. The ones on the southern side, on the land side, are perennially submerged. What you see in the inlet on the east side is a series of floating solar panels, which are largely protected from the fiercest storm surges because of the positioning of the island. And then you see a portion on the left, on the west side, where you have a big beach, really, which can take up ecological functions, ecosystem services. Now, what you see here is if you look at this drawing, you see on the left, low tide in the middle, high tide, and second to the right, high tide, and then extremely high tides on the right. You see there's a zone that will be systematically dry, but a lot of this structure can actually flood, and that's okay, and we can actually take advantage of that. Now, imagine in a public co-creation process, we will have various discussions. We can think and discuss together with simulations various shapes. But when it comes to what to do with the island, we can also have an extreme ecology scenario. We can calculate that. We can also calculate the costs and the benefits versus an extreme energy scenario, which is, you see these on the left, versus an extreme aquaculture farming scenario. So these are decisions and choices we will, I believe, of course, we need all the technocratic knowledge and insight that we can get. Otherwise, these choices don't make sense. But then we need to translate that and put that in a public discussion. And I think that's the only way we're going to get through this together, is if we debate it together in full transparency as to what the options and the outcomes are and the benefits for private players, but especially also for society as a whole. So this is an exercise on one particular island. I wanted to go back to this one just so there's a couple of functions I didn't mention. I don't know if you can see this on your screen, but there's a red perimeter rectangle on here as well. This is the area we would, in this exercise, reserve for a plant to produce hydrogen with the excess energy. This is really not necessary in early stages. This is a full build-out late stage scenario. When you want that on that location. In many cases, you could produce it elsewhere, near the windmill fields or on land, as long as you bring the hydrogen back here for storage. You see there's a little port, which is obviously necessary for the logistics and supply chain related to the functions on the island, and a road to access the various places. But you see here again on the left the ecosystem services, which could be radicalized over the whole thing. And we can make choices together. We say, look, we want to pay more taxes and have it all for ecology, or would we rather pay less taxes and farm this thing and have commercial licenses on it? These are the choices we face when we do these things in our domain. I just wanted to show you a few images of other versions. So we're working on a bunch. More than a dozen different options. There's 5 options which we try to work out in more detail, just to show what the consequences are of our different choices, so that our policy debate and our public debate and our technocratic debate and our commercial debate can be the best informed it should be, and so that finally we can come up with the choices we should make for instance, in Belgian territorial waters, but in principle for all of the North Sea and all of the liberal democracies surrounding it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Doge. I think it was a very interesting research you presented. Actually, for me, it's more like an impressive crash course in co-creation at sea. I think that was an excellent keynote to actually proceed with the other speakers. And I have the honor to present to you Mrs. Andreea Strachinescu, who is working at DG MARE. She is head of unit of the Maritime Innovation, Marine Knowledge and Investment Unit. Andreea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And I think that a lot were said by the previous speaker in terms on choices that we need to make, but nevertheless, considering the policy objectives and the need as well that we want to live in a better world, in a cleaner world, there are, of course, elements to work on, and we have already a good base. What I would like to present you today is how we are going to support, of course, based on the broad orientations and policy objectives. So already it was in a certain way presented by Commissioner Sinkevičius that we have a political framework, and this started in 2018 with the Clean Planet, when it was acknowledged that we need a broad portfolio of technologies, we need more innovation in order to support all the challenges that are needed at the level of the ocean. So all technologies are needed, and we need to invest in all of them in order to make better use. Green Deal then came later and put on the table the ambition to make Europe the first carbon neutral continent by 2050. And there are a lot of policy initiatives around, some of them already issued this year, and some of them coming soon. So we work to transform our economy to make it more sustainable, but also to be able to make a better future for all of us. So we have challenges in front of us, because with the warming of the atmosphere, also the oceans are suffering. And if you want to achieve what the Green Deal is proposing, it's not looking also at the reduction of emission, but how to make better and sustainable use of resources, so circular economy, to protect biodiversity, because all these changes have an impact on all the ocean, on all the nature connected to the ocean, and also to stop pollution. This is really an important problem, and an initiative is scheduled at the level of the Commission, Zero Pollution, and we need to address the pollution, trying to solve it at the source. We need to be better prepared for next events. Commissioner Sinkevičius already mentioned to make how to make better face on the situations like this. But we need to continue to try to be autonomous in enabling technologies. In some case, also to see how we can make better use on some dual technologies, the one that can be used for both military but also civil purposes. We have huge challenges in front of us, and the sea can solve them a lot, because currently we are putting a lot of pressure on land. We are putting a pressure in land to get our energy, but to get our food as well. And if we want to be able to decarbonize by 2050, that means that quarter of the electricity has to be generated offshore. It's quite huge, considering the capacity that needs to be put in place, having in mind the level of consumption also needed by 2050. So if we are switching more to electricity, that means we need to invest in clean electricity. And sea has an important potential. This to be added with the ambition to reduce the emissions from shipping, also 50% by 2050, and also more food from sustainable sources. And again, sea has the potential to offer. And again, everything linked with the ambition to maintain the European leadership in the maritime technology. Up to now, even the Chinese vessels are using European propulsion systems. Let's see how long. So we have to invest in order to be able to offer the technologies based that we need on a European base. Blue economy, it's quite, I would say, a longer story, more classical one, but also looking at the sectors that are coming now. So we see that along with renewable energy, we need as well to see how we can make better use of the blue biotechnology, the resources the ocean can offer on this, but also coastal protection, circular economy, marine technology, aquaculture and desalinization, because the water, fresh water, it's a challenge for some countries. So all of these are addressed. Then if we are starting with the Green Deal and we are looking at the clean energy, the first one, we have already, I would say, a good start in Europe. But what we want to achieve by 2050, it's 450 gigawatt of electricity coming from offshore. It's really huge, but in the same time, looking at the whole picture and what this can bring in terms of economic development, job creation. So we have a lot of benefits, but also a lot of challenges. Looking at the industrial challenge is to produce what is needed 70 gigawatts per year from 2030. So now we have in front of us clear scenarios from the European International Energy Agency, and we see that offshore is by 2050, it's going to take the lead. We have the national energy and climate plans coming, and let's see where we are. The fact that we have now around 70 gigawatt, and we want to arrive at 450. So huge challenges in front of us in terms of install capacity and the rate of installation needed. Now, protecting nature, it's also extremely important, and the biodiversity strategy that was announced already, it's taking putting on the table clear measures for this, because the sea is offering us, I would say, the oxygen we breathe, but also in the same time, the marine ecosystem are the home of important, I would say, pieces in the healthy, in the achievement of healthy ocean in the future. We have a lot of emission coming now from land, so we have to see how we can make the better use of sea to produce more food. In the same time, building wind farms, there are a lot of drawbacks, there are a lot of, if I would say, problems to be solved, but in the same time, opportunities. So all of these bring in the picture. So how we do it? First of all, we need to know the sea. We know that currently we know better Moon and Mars than sea. So we need to be able to map the sea, to be able to see what the sea can offer us. And we have, at the level of European Commission, we have a strong collaboration between European Marine Observation Data Network, Copernicus, so both that are satellite and in situ observation, so trying to offer how we can make better use. So knowledge is the base of development. And EMONET, it's, as I said, it's a partnership. It's already offering a lot of information. We need to support coming in this data, because this will allow to reduce the cost and risk for all the developments that are needed in the coastal and offshore areas. Already some examples, it was used in development of different projects, but also in mapping on, as an example, Mediterranean wind wave model. Spatial planning was already mentioned. We know that the member states have to send the plans by 31st of March 2021 that will, of course, will offer an answer on what is the vision and what is the vision in make better use of space at sea. There are also interesting projects already in place, quite ambitious. So the offshore wind farm, which is under the Belgian territory, but also from the wave energy. Also development of potential suitable sites for aquaculture, pilot project located in Norway, Ireland and Spain, or developing of ammonia fuel cell system through the fuel cells and hydrogen joint undertaking. What I want to say with this, that we have good solutions. Let's see how we bring all of this together. At the level of the Commission, we support, first of all, Horizon Europe, which is the research project, and then going to the market, Green Deal, Recovery, Resilience Funds, but all the work that we are doing with Blue Invest to bridge, I will say, that validate and to bring innovation to the market. Horizon Europe, it's extremely complex, but there are a lot of level of support. I would like just to invite you to have a look at all the clusters, climate, food, economy, environmental observation, all of this to see how the projects that you are aiming to develop, can be supported. Mission Ocean under Horizon fixed the ambition to achieve a healthy ocean by 2030. And here big projects, cross-cutting, like the multi-platform, can be supported. Connecting Europe facility, it's a huge instrument that can offer support for renewables that can be also cross-border now. It's FC that already it's arriving at the end. It will be InvestEU, and also with the recovery, a big package will be put on the table for the member states to support these developments. So I wanted just to present briefly Blue Invest. This is a community that it's supporting the sector, it's supporting the SMEs, because we know that we need a lot of agility of the SMEs to move it to the next level. It's going to the grants, but it's going also with the risk part, so guarantee and equity for the ones that already are raising the attention of the investors. We work on this, and we have the next call that is going to be opened on 23rd of November. I would like to invite you to make part of the community, because together interesting solutions can be developed and put in place to make better use of our seas and to achieve what we want in terms of policy objectives, but also well-being of all of us. If there are questions today, I'll be pleased to stay, of course. If not, later on, with great pleasure. Thank you very much from my side.
Thank you, Andreea. You focused on technology and innovations. You also mentioned the blue economy, and in the end you also mentioned the knowledge that is important. And actually that is an ideal bridge towards our next speaker, who is Dr. Ann-Katrien Lescrauwaet. She's working for the Flanders Marine Institute. She is the international relations director of the Flanders Marine Institute, and she will focus on this marine knowledge in co-creation processes. Ann-Katrien, the floor is yours.
Good morning from Brussels, and thank you, Marijn and G-STIC Coordination, for giving us this opportunity to speak before an audience of high-level actors from different sectors, and to bring the ocean research and innovation perspective in sustainable development, which is actually more than about the SDG 14, life below water. So the ocean space may seem unlimited, because, however, the user space for maritime activities is not, because they are primarily bound by depth and by distance from shore. For example, there are distance constraints for the cable transmission of produced wind, tidal or wave energy back to shore, both in terms of cost and energy losses through the transportation. And a recent assessment evidenced that current maritime industry highly overlap in their acceptable depth bands. 7 of the main blue growth sectors overlap in the 0 to 50 meters depth band, while only 4 of these 7 overlap in the 50 to 100 meters depth band. And beyond the 100-meter water depth, there is actually little or no overlap. There are other factors that may influence development, of course, such as current speed, exposure, distance to ports, seasonal considerations such as ice cover, and even juridical systems under which these maritime activities need to operate. And as the blue economy develops, competition between overlapping and conflicting interests in the limited space is growing. And there are mainly 2 strategies to address this increasing demand. One is to develop innovative technologies to move further offshore and operate at greater depth. And the other is to fine-tune the spatial and temporal scales of managed areas of these multiple use of space. And in both, the role of research and innovation is crucial. So we need to embrace a dynamic ocean. And our traditional approach to management of sea space has been one of drawing rigid boundaries around ocean features and resource users and space users. However, we know that the ocean is one connected space that is in constant flux, and we are still in a very steep learning curve about the seasonal and interannual variability of ocean features and life in the ocean, and especially for mobile features that includes species but also infrastructures. This static approach often leads to a mismatch. As climate changes, we observe more radical changes in extreme weather events, in distribution of species, and even in those features that we thought were static and for which we developed a suite of area-based management tools. So the graph to your left shows seasonal and interannual variability of wave climate, and it is quite striking to the west of coast of Ireland how variable this is. And the picture to the right shows you fluctuations of sea surface temperature over time, with the black areas showing the sea surface temperature range that migrating megafauna follow. The picture in the center actually is reminding us that we are developing these technologies that can align with this variability in the ocean, such as solar and tidal and wave energy devices. Moving towards a complementary dynamic ocean management practice means that we need to add extra layers of complexity. We move from a two-dimension flat representation of the ocean to incorporate a third dimension of space and a fourth dimension of time, so daily, seasonal, and decadal oscillations. We are forced to accept this variability in the ocean and its living and non-living environment, and we need to understand it. We need to understand it and embrace it in order to reduce risk and to create a more stable and safe operating environment. Now, we already talked a lot about co-design, and I will not repeat the sort of a definition of it, but it is stressed that design and co-design is about developing a process, and a process that ensures to meet in which the results meet the needs of the users and that the results are usable. And I think it's very fair to add that healthy and productive ecosystems are defining the boundaries of this co-design process. Yes, so the co-design and multiple stakeholder engagement comes in many different shapes and formats. And one of the most powerful co-design and co-creation instruments for implementing a dynamic and sustainable ocean management is actually ocean observation. Now, this is a major subject on itself, and there are many actors that are contributing, from the large-scale concerted global efforts through the Global Ocean Observing System, GOOS, and its European pillar, EuroGOOS, to commercial platforms engaged in the Ships of Opportunity initiatives, fishermen that sample ocean variables during their fishing operation, and even surfers and sailing vessels that contribute with data. There are still many concerns with data sharing and open access derived from ocean observation. There are issues on governance and data ownership, standardization, sustained funding, intellectual property, etc. But researchers and developers are coming to understand and embrace the value of data sharing. And actually, data providers are increasingly being engaged as co-authors of the outputs that is derived from their data set. And blockchain technology is fastly developing in this context. So the capacity for processing, integrating, and analyzing a disparate data set is now in place to produce reliable forecasts at the appropriate time and spatial scale, to communicate these with operators and vessels at sea so that they can be allowed to adapt to management measures in near real time. The essence of co-design is to move from sensors to systems and to system of systems that can actually integrate the near real-time data and integrate it in our management decisions. And this needs a concerted observation and monitoring plan that agrees on the essential ocean variables and how to implement them so that they can be widely used in supporting the delivery of essential services. There are many examples. We can touch upon that later. But it also touches upon the need to make technology accessible in a fair and an equitable way. And the expansion of low-cost cellular coverage brings dynamic management applications at reach of stakeholders for the purpose they need. So for this purpose, the principles of co-design are also applicable to research and commercial infrastructures, be it built or digital. And for this purpose, the EMODnet, as an example, and also European research and infrastructures are reaching out actively to their users through advisory boards, user conferences and workshops, hackathons, data ingestions, and other support services. The underlying principles is that is a free and open access, the interoperability, and the measure once and use many times principle. And the concept of a digital twin of the ocean wants to take this concept of co-creation one step further by integrating all assets related to the ocean, so data, models, physical observations, etc., and combine them with the digital technologies, artificial intelligence, big data analytics, into one digital component that actually represents the ocean in its multiple dimensions, in near real time and at a consistent high resolution. And co-design is also applicable in the early design stages of built infrastructures to avoid or mitigate negative effects in the environment and to optimize potential benefits to the user so that can actually coexist, such as this example you see on the right-hand side of a hole outside for sea lions. Acoustic deterrents are other examples. So for users' agreements, we tend to think in terms of actual conflicting or complementary space usage. And the combination of offshore wind energy and aquaculture has been mentioned today, and it has been the first multiple combination to mature. Given the growth also in the offshore wind energy sector, it had a pioneer role, and multi-use is mostly found in this sector. But there is a growing base of knowledge and expertise for co-use in other sectors, and I name just a few. Military use can be combined with the conservation of protected seabirds. Coastal shrimp fishing in a combination of dumping of dredged material. And the restoring of natural reefs of oysters is another example. However, user agreements of co-use and optimizing use space can also be in different and other terms. Think of joint maintenance. Sorry, there is one slide back. Yes, think of joint maintenance and operational services. Think of the coordination and cooperation along the value chain, access to capital, information exchange, agreements to and access marine robotics or larger scale expensive research infrastructure, or maybe set up joint expeditions to less explored and less accessible areas. This is particularly the case for marine biotechnology and bioprospection that moves into hardly accessible areas. Also the clustering and upscaling of infrastructures in larger investment frameworks and joint ventures to develop new technologies that allow us to move away from this traditional and limiting factor, which is depth and distance. And we are making also progress in the development of innovative concepts and approaches, together with the finance and insurance sectors, to de-risk large-scale investment. And some of you may know that today the world's first insurance policy on a coral reef is now in place in Mexico, thanks to these innovative principles for sustainable insurance. So concluding, I would like to say that the potential of a multi-use arrangement is not only defined by the operational boundaries of depth and distance from shore, because other economic and other market incentives for cooperation, such as shared operations and maintenance, are also drivers for co-use. Still, commercially exploited multi-use combinations are in their early stages. Often it is a clear policy framework that is missing, or clear licensing procedures to address risk, or maybe to de-risk operations. In some cases, report the lack of trust between sectors, so there may be some work to be done there in removing non-operational barriers to multi-use, especially where a potential for co-use is identified. So major efforts have focused on creating the knowledge we need for economic, technical and environmental feasibility of multiple use at sea. And science has been instrumental in the fine-tuning of the potential co-uses in space and time. Now, continued research and technological innovations are now in full development through open labs, innovation hubs, and other creative spaces where stakeholders collaborate for innovative and sustainable blue economy. In many of the successful pathways, public authorities take up the role of enablers and catalysts in this multi-stakeholder environment. And in a similar vein, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development is echoing this role of enabler in the fast-developing landscape at global scale. We look forward to the launch of an exciting Ocean Decade in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lescrauwaet. I think it was a very interesting presentation with a lot of examples in your presentation. Thank you very much for this. Before we go to the final closing keynote, I would like to invite you all to put questions on the Hopin platform. You find them. You can put your question in the chat box. Because we will have, after the final keynote, a short Q&A where we have several of our panelists that stay here to answer all of your questions. So please don't hesitate, ask your questions. And then we turn to the final keynote of this ocean session. And I'm actually very honored that we have, so to speak, a real field worker in co-creation. It is Dr. Philippe De Backer, which is the former Belgian Minister of North Sea, and he developed the second Marine Spatial Plan of Belgium, which came into force in March this year. There was already a reference by Ann-Katrien Lescrauwaet in her presentation, and also Mrs. Strachinescu referred to the importance of marine spatial planning in co-creation processes. So I'm very happy to give the floor to Dr. De Backer.
Thank you, Marijn, and good morning to all of you all across the globe following this conference. It's my pleasure to speak. We just have installed, beginning of October, a new government, so my task has been taken over by a new minister for the North Sea. But I do wanted to share this morning some of the insights that we had over the last 4 or 5 years in developing the second Marine Spatial Plan for the Belgian part of the North Sea. Before I go into more detail about the Marine Spatial Plan, let me state that for me, when I arrived in government in 2016, one of the key goals for me is to really bring all the stakeholders together to really contribute to a long-term vision, because the Marine Spatial Plan is often there for 6 years, but we need, as Alexander Doge already mentioned, also to look further down in time and to see what maybe the choices that children and our grandchildren want to make. And so in that philosophy, we brought together a lot of the stakeholders already, and you saw also a picture in the previous presentation where we tried to envisage what would a North Sea policy, a North Sea Marine Spatial Plan look like for the long term. We called it the North Sea 2050 strategy, and we asked the different stakeholders to take a different position, and to take a position of, for example, a fisherman, or a windmill farm developer, or somebody who wanted to go into aquaculture development, and to really change position and to imagine what the position would be like for somebody else. And this created a whole lot of dynamic, and also created and enabled us to really, with the different stakeholders, to go into this kind of long-term vision, which really delineated and really pushed also the development of the second Marine Spatial Plan. Let me briefly go into some of the legal foundations. We, of course, have a Marine Spatial Plan Directive. At the European level, we were, as Belgium, one of the pioneers developing a Marine Spatial Plan already in 1999. And so this has always been part of really encoding this also into Belgian legislation. So the Marine Spatial Plan in Belgium is hard legislation. There is a discussion, there is a whole process in front of that, but in the end, it is something that is enshrined and encoded into our legislation through a royal decree. And of course, this is an important process that needs to start. It starts with, of course, many years already before a marine spatial plan comes into operations. And already in 2016, 2017, we organized different events, bringing people together, not doing this kind of silo approach where you go and talk to different stakeholders separately or different communities separately. No, we brought everybody together, and to really also ask them what they envisage and what they would need in the next couple of years or decades from our North Sea. This led to a first draft of the Belgian Marine Spatial Plan. And of course, we also installed, and this is also enshrined into Belgian legislation, an advisory committee. Scientists, stakeholders, and public authorities are sitting there together, making sure that the correct advice, the correct technological and technocratic elements are being put into place to enable the vision that is being developed. And then, of course, we also had some formal processes which we had to go through, a strategic environmental assessment, but also transition and translations into different legislations, for example. And we had at the Council of Ministers a first approval of a draft on the 20th of April 2018. But the process doesn't stop there. Once this draft has been approved, through July and September of 2018, we also involved the larger public. We allowed them to give their intentions, to give their ideas, to give their remarks to the first draft proposal, which came out of the really bottom-up ideas of the different stakeholders. And as you see, we had more than 60,000 reactions. And I think this echoes what Alexander Doger has said, that we do consider our part of the North Sea really a public property. It is iconic, it has a large history, and a lot of people feel connected to it. So this explains, in my opinion, the more than 60,000 reactions we had from the broad public in this consultation. We also consulted our neighboring countries, of course also the regional authorities in Belgium, so everything at that moment came together. And through October to December, we took on board many of these responses, many of these ideas, many of these comments that were made on the draft plan. And we have written a second draft, writing also a summary declaration that we could echo back into the public consultation, because it's not a one-way consultation, it's a two-way consultation. We have ideas from the public, but of course we also give back and we share, and we do this in a very transparent manner, what has changed, how we implement these changes, and what we are doing with the consultation and the information that we got from the consultation. And this arrived at the final approval on the 7th of December. It was 3 days later than my birthday in 2018. So it was a nice gift from the government for my birthday at that moment. And the final step, of course, the publication in the official Belgian legislation. But let us take a little bit a closer look to what exactly is the content of this new Marine Spatial Plan. And it echoes really already from the start in 2016-17, when the consultation started, when we put together the first draft, really this multi-dimensional and multifunctional approach of our part of the North Sea. It's a very dense area where a lot of activities take place. But for me, it was really important that we not only took a look at what was the one or two dimensional scale of our North Sea, but also go down into the water column, what we could do there, and even take into consideration the dimension of time. And I will go into some examples during the discussion on the content. What we see is that we mapped the Marine Spatial Plan in really 8 thematical different subjects. What we see is that we have a very small piece of sea, which is very densely used, very densely populated also. And it is, in a federal country like Belgium, unicum that it is still the only territory which is managed at the federal level. The rest of the territory in Belgium is managed by the regional entities. And there are, of course, many stakeholders involved, from commercial fisheries, ports, dredging, coastal defense mechanism, but also shipping lines. All these elements have to be brought together. The essence for us was always to make sure that we could preserve what we have. Again, because there is this historical link to the North Sea as part of our natural heritage. And so we included in the Marine Spatial Plan 2 habitat areas, 3 bird areas and 3 search areas for habitat protection. So we also allowed not only to make decisions today, but also allow more in a a timely fashion to also expand these areas and to see where best together, in consultation again with the different stakeholders, where these new habitat protection areas should be put. And I think that this clearly shows that Alexander Dogen has taken over the baton and is really in the same philosophy as we have developed the Marine Spatial Plan, continuing this co-creation and really making sure that these projects get to the finish. So nature was a very important one. Energy, of course, also. You have seen the European Commission really stating that there's a very high ambition, not only in carbon reduction, but also in renewable energy production. And of course, the offshore North Sea energy production can play a huge role. We have designated 3 new zones for renewable energy, making sure that we double our capacity in offshore wind by 2025, 2026, and also, of course, enabling corridors, pipelines, making sure that there is also there, on the energy front, the possibility to connect everything and to make sure that we have also a strong connection to the land, as Alexander Dogen already explained also. Shipping, of course, is crucial for our country. A lot of our economic development and wealth depends on shipping, so making sure that the shipping lines stayed open, that the ports are accessible, and that we have enabled dredging and other operations to continue to make sure that these ports can remain operational is an essential part of economic development of the North Sea. We have room for fisheries and aquaculture, and those two are not opposite to each other. We have a lot of discussions, for example, on the fisheries front, where we say that we received claims saying this is now fisheries territory and nothing else can happen. But there's also technological development. There are new insights in how fisheries should develop over the next couple of years, and of course aquaculture can also play an important role there. We have this multi-spatial use, so we combine fisheries and aquaculture with other and different activities. It is allowed everywhere, but of course it has to really make sure that the safety is also guaranteed. That's basically the only limit that we put on that, so we really opened up again part of our North Sea territory to fisheries and aquaculture. We have sand extraction, which is a very important economic activity on our part of the North Sea. But here I can give a very nice example where, for example, there was a claim from these companies, these commercial entities, on being able to extract sand on these locations and really delineate these zones only for that activity. We had a very open and frank discussion with them. They said, when are you going to touch on these zones? When do you need them? When are you going to exploit them? And it became clear that they're only going to exploit them, for example, in 2030, 2035, or even later. So that means that in the meanwhile, these zones can be used for other activities like aquaculture, like maybe even setting up new windmill farms, making sure that they can operate during 20 or 25 years, and later then giving back this piece of the sea to other activities. So there is there very clearly also the opportunity to discuss together with the different stakeholders and to find creative solutions in this multifunctional use. And a last important part, of course, is coastal defense. Coastal defense goes hand in hand also with scientific research and, of course, our cultural heritage. And for example, we did a very extensive discussion with people who are interested in protected shipwrecks. So we extended the protection of shipwrecks in the Belgian North Sea tremendously. We have a specialized zone dedicated to marine innovation, enabling partners, public and private partners, to come in and to test, to pilot new ideas, new explorations of this zone. And of course also the research for new methods of coastal defense, integrating them in some of the coastal and sea projects that also Alexander Dogen already talked about. And you see that here everything really comes together. And again, like Alexander Dogen said, if you really bring this Marine Spatial Plan to life, it is clear that, again, all these stakeholders have to co-create and to make sure that all these elements are coming together. We have military use, which we have to safeguard, of course. And of course, we have commercial and industrial activities, which will take place in our North Sea. And we also want them to take place. There is still no fixed definition because we understood from the beginning that it was necessary to continue to bring the stakeholders together and to really think together with them to see how all these elements, all these different uses can come together within the Marine Spatial Plan. So we designated the zones. We allowed the zones to be operational in the next couple of years, but it is even possible to do this again in a co-creation fashion. We also allow some of these activities to take place in conservation areas. And this is, of course, something that is sometimes very difficult to explain to people, but at the same time we see again, by bringing the stakeholders together, that these solutions are possible, that there is a possibility to use and nature and economic activity can coexist and can even strengthen each other. For example, bringing windmill farms allows for additional substrates for biodiversity, for example. So all these elements, again, come together. And this is the ultimate marine spatial plan that will operate during the 2020-2026 period. It's, once you see this slide, it's a very densely used area, but I clearly tried to show that for every element, we clearly thought through how not only in the 2 dimensions, but really in the 3 or 4 dimensions of time and scale, we can really bring this multifunctionality to life. And I think that with Alexander Doge, with Fliss and other actors, this marine spatial plan is in good hands to be developed over the next couple of years. So thank you very much, and I hope that I shared some insights with you on how we developed this process of co-creation to come to a marine spatial plan. But the philosophy of co-creation is really also going on in really the filling in and the development of the marine spatial plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. De Backer. I think this was an excellent closing keynote of a co-creation at sea in action, so to speak. And then we have 20 minutes left to have a good discussion, because I can see that there is quite some questions coming in from the audience, which is nice. For the discussion, we have Dr. Lescrauwaet, Dr. De Backer, and Ms. Strachinescu that is available. Unfortunately, Professor Doge cannot be here for the discussions, and the Commissioner neither. So I suppose we directly dive into the first question, which is for Ms. Strachinescu. Are the Blue Invest Fund and grants open to countries outside the EU?
What we offer with the Blue Invest, we offer grants to SMEs and startups in Europe. We started like this, and it's for the moment how it is in place. Nevertheless, there is the part on which we work with EIF, that is the fund of the funds. So EIF is investing in other funds that can invest in the blue economy, and there is the possibility to get a financing for countries outside European Union, but grants are only for the European Union countries.
Okay, thank you very, very much. And another question is, what lessons learned from the co-creation project could in the short term be applied to existing coasts and beaches currently used for tourism and for tourism only? Maybe Dr. De Backer, you can answer for this question. Yeah,
it was something that was also part of our discussions. You see very clearly that the coastal areas are really interested in developing tourism. And that they don't want to interfere, for example, with the visual lines on the North Sea. It's something that was very clear. But at the same time, they also understand that there are new opportunities. There are new opportunities in ecotourism, in tourism at sea, and I think that the benefits lie. So I think one of the major lessons that we have learned is to really bring all the stakeholders together from the start. And even then, you will not always be able to align everybody, because there are sometimes still competing interests. But I think that by showing people some of the new opportunities that the new marine spatial plan can offer, I think that also draw them across the line. And I think that we have a large buy-in now also from the coastal areas in how this marine spatial plan will develop in the future.
Okay, that's a very interesting lesson to apply co-creation. Another question for you, Mr. De Backer. Belgium has a comparatively small maritime area that is surrounded by 3 neighboring countries. How deeply did Belgium coordinate with its neighbors in terms of results, for example? Other than shipping lanes, do the areas designated on Belgium's map continue in its neighbors' spaces?
It was a very close collaboration. So there's of course the official procedure that we have to go through, but also in an informal way we really coordinated with the Dutch, with the UK and with the French. And we are still developing this. One of the examples that I can give is that once we have designated our windmill farm zones on the side of the new farms which border France and the UK, we're also having discussions with them to see how we can, for example, link up the different windmill farms that are being developed on the other side in France and in the UK, for example. So we are really truly European in that sense also. We are a small country, we have a small part of the North Sea, so there is a necessity to collaborate and to make sure that we have also the buy-in of our neighboring countries, and even also there, do some co-creation and see if we can work together on some of the aspects, for example, connecting Natura areas or working together on the development of renewable energy.
Okay, so co-creation processes could actually lead to international marine spatial plans maybe in the future. Another question is, can Belgium's legislative experiences be put to value and be internationalized, for example, via economic diplomacy? Maybe that's something for Ms. Strachinescu.
I think that already the good results are, in a certain way, I would say, already put in practice, because all the good developments that are happening in the North Sea, and I'm speaking now about renewable energy, are in a certain way already taken forward. We know very well that there is involvement of ELIA in projects which are taking place in the other side of the Atlantic. So I think that what we are doing and I would say the first runner in terms of development of energy at sea, it's already taken in some other parts of the world. Now it's the wave energy as well, and the tidal that developments that are happening in Europe, the deployment of technology, then it are happening also in some other places around the world, not only close to Canada, but also Pacific, close to Hawaii. So there are developments, and I think that we need to continue this, because there are good examples that can be taken forward in some different part of the world. And this, of course, beyond this, as I said, there is a lot, if I could say, of Belgian excellency in development of this.
Okay.
Can I maybe add something to that? Because I think we were one of the first countries in Belgium to really pioneer this marine spatial planning. And the teams that have developed in the 90s, the first marine spatial plans, went on to work for UNESCO, worked for the European Commission and other international organizations. And they really became blue ambassadors for the Belgian approach on how we did it. And I think that's a good thing. And you see that many countries have now adopted also this kind of co-creation, consultation before they're setting up a marine spatial plan. And I think this is really something that our experience that we can share with the international community.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question: EU regulations push towards blue growth. How do they want to establish co-creating processes in emerging sectors? Maybe again, Ms. Strachinescu.
Yeah, I would say it's not really regulation, because regulation, in terms, if we are taking from the legislative perspective, it's not really what is happening with the blue economy. Blue economy, it's we have a communication behind, and there is a lot of work currently being done. Not late than yesterday took place a large round of consultation with various stakeholders to develop blue economy of the future. And co-creation, it also is going to happen. We have currently in the pipeline, and is going to be open quite soon, the public consultation for the ocean observation. It was previously mentioned also during a previous intervention. So measure once, use more. So to put in place collaboration among the member states and research and innovation with the mission Ocean. That the base principle of Horizon Europe, it's co-creation. So we are going to engage with stakeholders, we are going to engage with citizens in order to put in place the actions for the ocean in order to achieve a healthy one by 2030. And there is a lot on which citizens can get engaged. So first of all, for the complex actions, co-creation is needed, and all various stakeholders that have the smallest interest in this can engage.
Okay. So actually co-creation is at the heart of Horizon Europe, which is of course a good thing to us. And another question maybe for Dr. Lescrauwaet. On land there are successful experiments with aquaponics, and here they refer to urban aquaponics. Would this somehow be possible at sea? I think this is more reference to the urbanization of our marine space. Can you shed a light on from a scientific point of view?
Yes, certainly. And actually, I would like to add a little bit to the previous question, because as a scientist and as Scientist Institute, what we often see is that researchers and delegations from outside, from abroad, they visit us. When they visit us, they are especially drawing the attention to the models and the cooperation models that we have in Flanders and in Belgium, and the specific role that the government is playing there. So the models that are innovative and help and support this co-creation are really very important. And related to this question, of course, this is a question, but if you that is related to land use, but if you transpose it to the sea, actually there are very similar experiences and developments, and these are related to the multi-trophical way of organizing aquaculture. It was already referred to the fact that we prefer, especially in areas that are highly eutrophied, to use extractive species. Extractive species means that we are not only choosing for the species maybe with the best commercial application, but they also have an added value to restore and improve the health of the ecosystem. And the multi-trophic system of doing aquaculture is precisely thinking of how you can create and develop an aquaculture system that works and thinks in layers, where the different species, not only animal species, but also plants and microbes, can collaborate, actually co-create to sort of improve the ecosystem in some cases and have or come closer to a healthy ecosystem. So that is the ultimate goal.
Okay, so it's not only humans, but also other species have to co-create. I recall from this answer. Thank you very much for this. Another question maybe also for you, it's more for Alexander Doge, but maybe you can also answer it, Ann-Katrien. How will sedimentation and current patterns be affected by a large structure near shore? And can it be a coastal protection measure? And what about ecosystems?
Well, it's a very open and broad question, but nature-based solutions and working with ecosystem is something that has been said a few times today. And I think we've all learned lessons from maybe previous, I wouldn't say mistakes, but maybe not the best choices. And the good thing is that we're learning from this and we are incorporating our lessons in new developments and new structures. And nature-based solutions is one of them. And that takes into account and that acknowledges actually that we need to take into account all the knowledge we have. So we're not only focusing on a few sectors, on a few aspects of this development. So we take into account broader aspects of knowledge. We take into account not only engineering aspects, but also biology, ecology. So with that in mind, and I think we will be able to jump much further and avoid these mistakes from the past.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much. I'm waiting for the next question. Well, it's a question for you both. It's about policy. How to connect integrated maritime policy, so the IMP, with marine spatial planning, MSP, and integrated coastal zone management, ICZM, and land planning into a consistent framework. So how to make these approaches or instruments consistent in their overlapping areas. Maybe first, Dr. De Backer, from your experience in Belgium, what would you answer to this question, overlapping?
But you see that there are a lot of international, national, and sometimes regional policies who sometimes conflict or at least do not play into each other. And I think that, again, they're also making sure that you have this kind of stakeholder management, especially when you're talking about the national. I'm talking about Belgium. We have regional entities who are competent in certain areas. The federal level is competent. And we have a permanent discussion. I installed a group of people, the North Sea platform, where all these stakeholders can come together to discuss this kind of legal, governmental governance factors, how we handle things. And what we saw in the past, and I think it's also a mistake where we learned from, is that entities were fighting each other. They were going to court to get that doesn't work. So what we did is we put everybody in the same room. We discussed, we found solutions, and it showed that it works much faster. It creates better solutions, and it doesn't create all the press fuss because one competent authority is fighting another one. So that solved a lot of issues, and it really allowed people to continue to work. We see the same at the international level sometimes, that international agreements are translated into European policy and then in national policy, and that we see differences between countries still. So I think there the European Commission, but it's something that has been discussed for many, many years, should push a little bit more to really align all the countries in the same direction. At the same time, also allow for this kind of diversity, because not every country is the same or has the same challenges. So it is something that is a constant flux. The international agreements are already changing also. But again, there also it's important as a country or as a European Union together, that we play our role on this international fora, and that by doing that, we have an impact in shaping this legislation before it comes into force. And just to give you one example, we have been very active, for example, when reducing emissions for shipping at the IMO level. We created this coalition and we really pushed it through, the 50% reduction in CO2. So it shows that even a small country can really play a forefront role, can be a blue leader, as we call them, in making these policies come true before these kind of legislations come into force.
Okay, very interesting. So actually also policymakers need to go towards co-creation, that's what I understood, but also the European Commission should push a little bit more on some aspects. Maybe if you can have a very brief comment on that, Ms. Strachinescu.
Yeah, I think that we are going to do it, and in fact it was already done, because with the projects that we are going to, the call for proposals that we are going to ask, this collaboration is needed. I mean, it's not possible. If a call is going to come for multi-platforms, it's true that everybody has to collaborate, and sometimes even if there are overlapping on probably not at the end the same interest, we have to look at the global one. And we will support, of course, and from the legislation point of view, of course, that the colleagues working on international are following this closely. So we are supporting to move to the next level and to bring all the people around the table that are working on the sector, supporting and making use of the sea resources.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we are running out of time. Maybe to close this session, I would like to give the floor to the three panelists to say in 1 or 2 sentences what they think about co-creation and what is the most important step to take in the near future. I start with Ann-Katrien.
Well, if just a few words, I would say drawing down the walls. What I see in last years, that the separation between researchers and managers and policymakers and industry is becoming more of an artistic flu. We understand each other's situation better, and that is helping us forward. So I think breaking down walls is really very important.
Okay. Dr. De Backer?
But 2 things from my side. I think that, I'm a scientist, I was a politician, I worked in the private sector, and I think that, like you said, this kind of silo thinking is disappearing, and you need also people who understand different aspects and to bring these people together. So I think there's a big role also for government to really create these platforms where people can exchange, explain also to each other where they come from and what they mean by certain things, and to really start this true co-creation process. And then what I've seen also as a policymaker is that there's sometimes some reluctance in governments in really stepping out, being transparent, including the public. And I only have one message there: just do it, because otherwise it's going to bite you later on. So you just have to start these processes early on to make sure that you can really conclude the investments that are needed, not only in this oceans perspective, but in many, many other instances also.
A very clear message for policymakers. And then Ms. Strachinescu?
I would say just that everybody has to have in mind and to have a look at the global, the common objective. We know that there are small behind around, but only together can achieve to make the sea, the ocean, a better place that can make us live in a better world. So common objective is the most important. And then everybody should work, of course, together, because at the end, all of us, we are going to take advantage of this.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it was a highly productive session. I want to thank, first of all, the audience for tuning in and for asking the questions. Of course, also the G-STIC organization to organize this in this kind of difficult circumstances. And last but not least, of course, the excellent speakers we had today and the panelists. Thank you very much and see you soon. Bye.
Progress. It's been around as long as humankind. Ever since our own existence, we have been moving forward. This unstoppable urge for improvement has brought us great things. It has brought us motion. It has brought us beauty. It has brought us time. It made our world a bigger place, one that doesn't end at the horizon, or even at the border of our own planet. It made us go faster, higher, further. It made us do things that nobody imagined possible. But the thing with progress is, it never stops. So what will it bring tomorrow? Well, that's for us to decide. Because today, we are all part of it. And it's up to all of us to guide it. To turn problems into solutions. Threats into opportunities. Cannots into can-dos. And human progress into world progress. Progress that is not just about us, and not just about today, but real progress that's for every living being, and for all generations to come. It's this kind of progress that drives us, why we use our 140 years of great history for an even greater future. Why we work together with partners and people who don't believe in the impossible. And why we use our unique tools to help shape a beautiful tomorrow.
At Aquafin, we collect and treat wastewater from almost 6 million people in Flanders. We manage a large set of assets on behalf of the Flemish region. In an ever-changing world, we are facing many challenges, such as changing and aging infrastructure or climate change, with more intense rain and long periods of drought. But also plenty of opportunities are out there. For example, digital transformation and new emerging technologies like drone inspections, resource recovery, the Internet of Things, and real-time control. Our R&D focuses on knowledge building, with the purpose of developing new applications and services, gathering in-depth knowledge on social challenges, and providing solutions on 4 pillars: circular economy, climate adaptation, energy transition, water quality. Are you the perfect partner to help us achieve our ambitions and prepare for the future?
You want to know about ING and sustainability. Because the simple fact is this: it's becoming even more important to more of you, and you care what companies are doing about it. So here it is. As a global bank with billions of euros flowing through our books, it's our duty to not only say no to financing that's harmful, but to say yes to financing change and making a positive impact. For ING, sustainability is about creating a healthy planet with prosperous people. What's the biggest challenge for the planet? The climate crisis. And what's a daily challenge for too many people? The statistics are clear. It's money. First, the climate crisis. There's a plan to keep global temperatures from rising too much, but it's not cheap. That's where we come in. Not only do we provide lending to green projects and companies, we help clients improve their own sustainability and reward them when they do. We finance the shift in technology needed to meet climate goals while measuring how we're doing and where we and our clients can do better. We call it our Terra approach. It makes us one of the first banks to measure and steer our portfolio in line with the Paris Agreement. Second, let's talk money. It's one of the leading causes of stress around the world. Half of households in Europe are struggling to make ends meet, and it affects more than our wallets. Financial health is also linked to our physical health and social well-being. As a bank, money is what we know best. We can help people be better at money too. We use our strength and innovation, creating things like forecasting tools and digital coaches. Financial health is also a part of our community involvement, like our partnership with UNICEF, where we help youth get the skills they need for a better future. Whether climate crisis or financial health, one thing is clear. No one sector can solve the world's problems, much less one bank. We seek out partnerships with peers, governments, and society. That's the only way we can make any meaningful positive impact. For us, for our customers, for the world.
Progress. It's been around as long as humankind. Ever since our own existence, we have been moving forward. This unstoppable urge for improvement has brought us great things. It has brought us motion. It has brought us beauty. It has brought us time. It made our world a bigger place. One that doesn't end at the horizon, or even at the border of our own planet. It made us go faster, higher, further. It made us do things that nobody imagined possible. But the thing with progress is, it never stops. So what will it bring tomorrow? Well, that's for us to decide. Because today, we are all part of it. And it's up to all of us to guide it. To turn problems into solutions. Threats into opportunities. Cannots into can-dos. And human progress into world progress. Progress that is not just about us, and not just about today, but real progress that's for every living being. And for all generations to come. It's this kind of progress that drives us. Why we use our 140 years of great history for an even greater future. Why we work together with partners and people who don't believe in the impossible. And why we use our unique tools to help shape a beautiful tomorrow. Progress. It's been around as long as humankind. Ever since our own existence, we have been moving forward. This unstoppable urge for improvement has brought us great things. It has brought us motion. It has brought us beauty. It has brought us time. It made our world a bigger place. One that doesn't end at the horizon, or even at the border of our own planet. It made us go faster, higher, further. It made us do things that nobody imagined possible. But the thing with progress is, it never stops. So what will it bring tomorrow? Well, that's for us to decide. Because today, we are all part of it. And it's up to all of us to guide it. To turn problems into solutions. Threats into opportunities. Cannots into can-dos. And human progress into world progress. Progress that is not just about us, and not just about today, but real progress that's for every living being. and for all generations to come. It's this kind of progress that drives us, why we use our 140 years of great history for an even greater future. Why we work together with partners and people who don't believe in the impossible. And why we use our unique tools to help shape a beautiful tomorrow.
You want to know about ING and sustainability. Because the simple fact is this: it's becoming even more important to more of you, and you care what companies are doing about it. So here it is. As a global bank with billions of euros flowing through our books, it's our duty to not only say no to financing that's harmful, but to say yes to financing change and making a positive impact. For ING, sustainability is about creating a healthy planet with prosperous people. What's the biggest challenge for the planet? The climate crisis. And what's a daily challenge for too many people? The statistics are clear. It's money. First, the climate crisis. There's a plan to keep global temperatures from rising too much, but it's not cheap. That's where we come in. Not only do we provide lending to green projects and companies, we help clients improve their own sustainability and reward them when they do. We finance the shift in technology needed to meet climate goals while measuring how we're doing and where we and our clients can do better. We call it our Terra approach. It makes us one of the first banks to measure and steer our portfolio in line with the Paris Agreement. Second, let's talk money. It's one of the leading causes of stress around the world. Half of households in Europe are struggling to make ends meet, and it affects more than our wallets. Financial health is also linked to our physical health and social well-being. As a bank, money is what we know best. We can help people be better at money too. We use our strength in innovation, creating things like forecasting tools and digital coaches. Financial health is also a part of our community involvement, like our partnership with UNICEF, where we help youth get the skills they need for a better future. Whether climate crisis or financial health, one thing is clear. No one sector can solve the world's problems, much less one bank. We seek out partnerships with peers, governments, and society. That's the only way we can make any meaningful positive impact. For us, for our customers, for the world.
Brewing awesome beer starts with the best ingredients, which require a healthy environment and thriving communities. That's why sustainability isn't just part of our business, it is our business. Through our 100+ Accelerator, we are partnering with great minds and unlocking innovation across our value chain to ensure sustainable development around the world. Through our 2025 sustainability goals, we are working to connect thousands of farmers to technologies and skills to reduce their environmental footprint and improve their livelihoods, improve water availability and quality to communities in high-stress basins, improve recycling and circularity in partnership with our suppliers and communities, and catalyze the transition to a low-carbon future by championing renewable electricity and reducing our carbon footprint. Let's build a cleaner, more prosperous future. Let's keep brewing a stronger, better world. Together.
Progress. It's been around as long as humankind. Ever since our own existence, we have been moving forward. This unstoppable urge for improvement has brought us great things. It has brought us motion. It has brought us beauty. It has brought us time. It made our world a bigger place. One that doesn't end at the horizon, or even at the border of our own planet. It made us go faster, higher, further. It made us do things that nobody imagined possible. But the thing with progress is, it never stops. So what will it bring tomorrow? Well, that's for us to decide. Because today, we are all part of it. And it's up to all of us to guide it. To turn problems into solutions. Threats into opportunities. Cannots into can-dos. And human progress into world progress. Progress that is not just about us, and not just about today, but real progress that's for every living being, and for all generations to come. It's this kind of progress that drives us, why we use our 140 years of great history for an even greater future. Why we work together with partners and people who don't believe in the impossible. And why we use our unique tools to help shape a beautiful tomorrow.